Hello everyone. I'm excited to talk to you today about my research, which focused on troubleshooting poor litter size within a Farrow-to-Wean production system. So just for a little bit of background, commercial swine farms will generate large volumes of reproductive and performance data. This data is often very comprehensive. So for example, at a single farm, they can track a single sow's parities throughout her lifetime. It includes statistics such as total number born, number weaned, and Wean-to-Service interval, just to name a few. However, current data analytics are typically not very thorough or sophisticated. Data analysis can be used to identify performance issues, assess management practices, and help identify any underlying causes to problems that a swine producer may be having. So for example, a swine producer currently may only really be able to evaluate averages of statistics across a farm, but may not be able to really see how the statistics interact or how they form a larger picture. So therefore, to provide a real-world example of how commercial data can be utilized thoroughly, the objective of the study was to troubleshoot poor litter size in a North Carolina Farrow-to-Wean production system with the help of the National Swine Reproduction Guide. So the National Swine Reproduction Guide is an online database that was created by several swine professionals across the United States. It has over 1,000 fact sheets and references to guide pork producers in determining the cause of any reproductive issues that they might be having. It has 3 overarching categories: problems with replacement gilts, problems with sows, and problems with boars, or more specifically, with semen quality. Once choosing a category, you can then narrow down to the specific problem that you're having, and then you can see a fact sheet with viewable references on how to alleviate the problem. So the National Swine Reproduction Guide also establishes decision boundary criteria. These criteria are the maximum or minimum levels of acceptable reproductive performance for any given trait. So they're not to be confused with production goals, which are the optimum levels of performance. These are just the bare minimum or the bare maximum, depending on the trait, and if you fall above or below the trait, you should probably look into why. It's also important to note that these values listed here are just those recommended by the National Swine Reproduction Guide. A producer can change these values to fit whatever they want, depending on their needs. So to further explain this, for this first trait listed, total number born, sows in their first parity should have no less than an average of 10.5 piglets born per litter, and sows in their second parity and up should have no less than 11.5 piglets being born per litter. For another trait, Wean-to-Service interval, both sows from all parities should have no more than 10 days between weaning and returning to estrus. The data for this study came from 9 farms within one North Carolina production system across 5 years. There were 235,807 farrowing events total. Sows from the study were large white landrace crosses, and they were fed to condition and gestation and had unlimited access to feed and lactation. The data was analyzed using the GLM procedure in SAS, with a p-value of less than 0.05 being considered significant. Traits that were obtained or calculated included total number born alive, the number of stillborns and mummies, the number weaned, and the Wean-to-Service interval. Fixed effects were parity, farm, year, and season, with parity categories being generally divided into sows in their first parity, sows in their second parity, and sows in their third through sixth parities. There were 9 farms in 5 years, and then season was divided based on date of farrowing. So for example, summer categorized sows farrowed sometime between July and September, which means they were gestating predominantly during the hot summer months. To help sift through the massive amounts of data, we put the sows into contemporary groups based on the farm they were located, the year they farrowed, the season they farrowed, and then if they were in their first, second, or third through sixth parities. So for example, sows in their second parity that farrowed during the fall of 2012 and were located at Farm B would make up one contemporary group. So with 9 farms, 5 years, 4 seasons, and 3 parity groups, we had 540 contemporary groups total for this study. So here's a small subset of what the data from the contemporary groups looked like. So here we have 4 different contemporary groups of sows all from the same farm that farrowed in 2011, with it being in their first parity. So these values represent the averages for the contemporary group for each trait listed, And then the highlighted values are those that failed to meet the decision boundary criteria. So when completed for all of the contemporary groups that we had, highlighting the values that failed to meet the decision boundary criteria was really useful for determining if the farm's productive issues were coming from a certain farm, a certain year, a certain season, or a certain parity group. So now I will move into the results of the study. So here is the average total number born by parity for the entire production system. As you can see, a total number born doesn't really vary much across parity. However, the second parity sows did have the lowest average total number born, with 12.1 piglets being born per litter. Total number born did increase by year, going from 11.9 piglets being born on average in 2011 to 12.8 piglets being born in 2015. This is generally expected across the industry as the farms improve their genetics and their production. And then across the different seasons, total number born was slightly lower for sows that were gestating in the hot summer months, but overall there's not an extreme difference. So then we began evaluating the groups and traits that failed the decision boundary criteria. So this graph shows the percentage of contemporary groups that failed the decision boundary criteria for total number born in red and number weaned in black. So as a reminder, per the decision boundary criteria, first parity sows should have no less than 10.5 piglets born per litter and no less than 8.5 piglets weaned. Parity 2 sows and up should have no less than 11.5 piglets born per litter and 9.5 piglets weaned. So as you can see from this graph, 24% of second parity sows, or the contemporary groups, failed to meet the total number born decision boundary. And for number weaned, the percentage that failed increased as parity increased. Looking at the percentage of mummies and stillborns per litter, you can see that in every parity, the percentage of sows that failed to meet the decision boundary for mummies is at least 44% and is not particularly higher for one parity versus another. This means that 44% of all the contemporary groups had greater than 2.5 mummies born per litter on average. So the wean-to-service interval analysis looked at both the average wean-to-service interval length for the sows and also the percentage of sows that had less than a 10-day wean-to-service interval. So you can see from this graph that while the average number of sows were coming in within 10 days, which meets the decision boundary criteria, greater than 10% of the sows were not coming in by 10 days, 73% of the time for parity 1 sows and 47% of the time for parity 2+. So you can kind of think of this as like a bell curve, where even though the center of the bell curve, or the average number of sows, were still coming in within 10 days, that the tail of the bell curve is very, very large, which means there's still a high number of sows that aren't coming in by 10 days, which means that this farm might have a problem with extended wean-to-service interval length. So after identifying specific problems within a production system, you can then look at the National Swine Reproduction Guide to see what recommendations exist for alleviating the problem. So for example, looking at low total number born and extended wean-to-service interval length will bring you to this page, which reads, if lower protein diets are not appropriately formulated to ensure essential amino acids requirements are met, increased delays in subsequent wean-to-service or wean-to-estrus period may occur, particularly in first parity sows. So this indicates that one of the problems this farm might be having with their low litter size might be related to inadequate amino acid content, especially like lysine, in their lactation diets. So we also calculated some regression estimates in SAS. This graph shows that the average total number born of subsequent litter for sows with varying lactation lengths. So a 1-day increase in lactation length led to a 0.045 piglet increase in total number born for parity 1 sows and a 0.073 increase in piglets for parity 2+ sows. When looking at the effect of wean-to-service interval on subsequent total number born, we noticed a notable dip in total number born in sows returning to estrus within 7 to 8 days after weaning. This dip occurs in both parities, and while we're unsure as to the cause of it, sows that were serviced on days 7 and 8 had about 0.7 of a pig smaller in their subsequent total number born than sows that were serviced on days 3 through 6. So a normal return to estrus is especially wanted for this production system. So the last 2 slides I showed you that increasing lactation length can increase subsequent total number born, and decreasing wean-to-estrus or wean-to-service interval can also increase total number born. So then we looked at lactation length and wean-to-service interval, and we found that a one-day increase in lactation length reduced the subsequent wean-to-service interval by 0.06 days for parity 1 sows and 0.05 days for parity 2 plus sows. So for this production system, these three traits, lactation length and total number born and wean-to-service interval, are very, very linked. Some additional regression estimates. We found that a 1 piglet increase in number born alive improved subsequent total number born by 0.13 piglets for parity 1 sows and 0.17 piglets for parity 2 plus. However, a 1 piglet increase in number weaned reduces subsequent total number born by 0.075 piglets for parity 1 sows and 0.05 piglets for parity 2 plus. So overall, the results indicated that there was a poorer performance in second parity sows compared to third through sixth parity sows. There was a high incidence of mummies across all parities. Extending lactation length reduced the wean-to-service interval and increased subsequent total number born. And sows serviced 7 and 8 days post-weaning had reduced subsequent total number born compared to sows that were serviced 3 to 6 days post-weaning. And so from that summary, and then looking at the National Swine Reproduction Guide, we came up with the following recommendations for this farm. They can try to limit cross-fostering onto their parity 1 sows, as those seem to suffer the most in terms of reduced total number born, or subsequent total number born, for each additional piglet that was weaned. They can try to review their lactation intake and composition, especially for amino acid content. If it's economically feasible to do so, they can try to extend their sow lactation length, as just 1 additional day of lactation can reduce subsequent total number, or increase subsequent total number born and reduce the wean-to-service interval. They can also try to breed sows displaying estrus 7 and 8 days post-weaning on their next cycle, again if it's economically feasible to do so. The producer would have to decide if the benefit of the increased total number born would outweigh the cost of having sows on additional non-productive days. So with that, I'd like to thank my co-authors, especially Dr. Mark Knauer and Jeff Wiegert, for all of their help with this project. I'd also like to thank the U.S. Pork Center of Excellence for creating the National Swine Reproduction Guide, and then of course North Carolina State University.